Yeah, but have you ever feared that somebody close to you has been changed suddenly?
Yes, I've definitely had it where people have changed overnight, and then I find
Really?
out it's actually somebody completely different. And it's just me, just forgot what they look like. I'm very bad with faces.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today, is people that suddenly change overnight.
Called women.
Theme tune, just go to the theme tune.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.
Welcome to the Boo-Foons Mystery Investigators. I'm Dan.
And I'm Steve, but you can call me Dan if you have any complaints.
Or you can call
I'm
us.
Steve, actually.
Yeah, send all
Steve.
complaints to 10 Downing Street.
Yeah, they'll just burn it with the rest of the complaints.
Yeah, we're both the Prime Minister. And today we're talking about changelings.
Tell me about changelings, Dan.
They change.
The end.
The end of the episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening. Today, very short episode. Changelings are things that change. In British folklore, which is where we're going to sort of start with this one, because it will go elsewhere. Changelings are the fairy offspring or elderly fairies that have been substituted for human infants or babies. So 1 minute you've got a baby in your house, the next minute it's a changeling, which is a fairy or an old fairy that is taking the place of your baby, and it's usually ill-tempered or strangely intelligent.
That's a Gen Z teenager.
Yeah, they're the ones that are after my lot. Although people mistake millennials for Gen Z, and it's like, no, millennials were brought up on South Park.
What's the new gen? Yeah, idiots, all of them. Right, okay, changelings.
Changelings. Now, as I said, in British folklore, they're seen as being fairies, either young fairies or elderly fairies that have replaced humans and babies.
Can we just use the word fae rather than fairies? Because there's double meaning in that. And again, I keep trying to make puns and I mustn't make puns. Like I say, idiot. I look at the world and it's just like, it's all just like, they're all idiots. I'm an old-fashioned bloke.
Yes, but let's be honest. The real reason why you don't want to use the word fairy is because when you say it, it sounds like ferry.
Yeah, I can't say it. Okay,
yeah. let's be honest. That's the real reason why you don't want to use it. You're just dressing it up as I don't want to insult people because of this thing. It's actually because when you say fairy, it sounds like fairy.
Yeah. But yeah, hey, much easier. For me, it is anyway.
Changelings have been seen in mainly European folklore, and there is a lot of changeling stories in British folklore where a changeling is a deformed offspring of a fairy or an elf. Some European countries, it will be orcs and things as well, and they're substituted for humans. Typically, the humans are kidnapped. Some stories, they're given to the devil. Other stories, they are given to the fairies to strengthen all of the fairies that they've got. And the bit where this story takes a bit of a dark turn is the stories of trying to get your original child back from a changeling range from make it laugh, fair enough, right up to pure full-on torture and torturing a baby, which has caused historically numerous cases of child abuse. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just thinking, that is really sad. I mean, but if you're talking about everything from making people laugh to torturing them, you could just make them listen to this podcast. That could tick all those boxes without anyone going to prison.
Oh dear.
I like the way that apparently, one of the reasons for an elderly fae to become a changeling is because they want to be coddled in their final years. So
Which is kind
they'll
of cute.
replace a child. So just cuddle me, God. I want to be loved before I die. That's so sad. That's really sad. Surely there must be like a home for them. There's where you just stick a load of old age fae.
So the changeling myths and legends come around the fact that people try to explain strange characteristics within their child's health or personality.
Oh, I think you're jumping too quickly into that. I think we need to find out more about them before we jump into the theories.
Okay.
Because
Well, let's talk a bit more about them. So should I talk about the characteristics of them, of how to spot a changeling? So if you are somebody listening to this and you have young children, here are the things to look for in your child if they have suddenly changed. And this may tell you that they are a changeling. So the first one is that they will possess some form of shape-shifting power, which is what makes them change slightly to look like a human child or mimic the human child that they have replaced. That they've managed to make themselves look a little bit different to kind of look a bit like your child. And it's not actually uncommon among Fae to be able to shapeshift a little bit to do that. And it was a whole thing of just basically, look, I am the child that was here originally. That being said, sometimes with the elderly ones, they still looked old anyway.
But
So
babies often do look old, don't they?
Yeah.
So are they when they're talking about things like that, are they talking about the child would one day just look slightly different, or they would see it changing slightly different? Not like aging or anything like that, but there would be something weird happens that they had never noticed before.
So it's that the child looks ever so slightly different to how they once did, which could be that their eyes are slightly different to an average baby. It could be that their ears are slightly different. It could be that they have more wrinkles. Something about the child looks different because they've shapeshifted, but they haven't shapeshifted perfectly to match what the child looked like.
Okay, so we're not talking about comparing their baby to another person's baby. It's basically their baby would look different another day. So that you would wake up and your kid's got different color eyes, or one of their ears is bigger than the other all of a sudden, that kind of thing. Because if it was, if you've got an ugly child, your child has been ugly since it popped out. I mean, children look very different from when they've been forced out to when their features pop back into where they should be. When their heads now look like a sausage, have now gone into like a proper human size. You know what, baby, you know what children are like.
So in some stories, it is a case of you are comparing your child to other people's children.
Oh, never do that.
And your baby doesn't look like your next door neighbour's baby, for example. So therefore, they might be another creature disguising themselves as a baby. And some of them, it's that your child has been kidnapped completely and now looks very different to how it did the previous day. So
when did your parents suspect you had been replaced by a changeling?
When they found me under the gooseberry bush.
Because I saw pictures of you when you were a baby and you don't look like a human baby.
No, that's because in Norfolk we're all found under gooseberry bushes.
Yeah, but it does also say here that they're often got things like 6 toes.
Yep.
I'm looking at you, Dan. You've known some changelings. I know that.
Maybe I am a fairy or a pixie. Maybe that's why I like all these stories that much.
You want disinformation so people don't believe in it anymore, so you can get away with it.
Exactly.
No, but didn't you meet you met a 6-toed changeling in a pub once, didn't you?
Yeah, that's been discussed on the podcast before.
Yeah, that's it. She assaulted you because you knew the truth.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
The next trait that changelings have, they can be ravenously hungry, so much that they might eat an entire poor household out of house and home.
Yeah.
Now we're looking over at you.
Yeah, you just did that one on purpose. You made that one up, didn't you? You can tell on the channel it's a fat kid who just kept eating everything. Steve, that's you, isn't it? You certainly didn't look like any other child because you'd eaten them all. Can't argue with that.
The third common trait, so when I say traits, these are traits from all the different folklores and stories around changelings. This is the most common traits that they have. So third trait is that changelings have intelligence and behaviors that do not match their age. For example, they could be more intelligent than another child their age. For example, prodigies who can talk, sing, or even dance with incredible skills far beyond the typical child. However, on the other front, they may develop much slower than other typical children.
I've ticked 2 of these boxes. Dan, is there any more I can tick? What's it?
Well, the common thoughts around these whole being prodigies that are incredibly intelligent, or the other hand, developing much slower, is because of the immortal nature, where the age span that they have are different to that of humans. So, for example, immortal fairies would be a child for a lot longer than a human child, so therefore they may develop much slower, but then at the end of their life, they're very, very wise, hence being in need of care and knowing a lot of things. So it's about the whole idea, the creature that the child has been replaced with has a different lifespan to a human, so therefore either they would develop quicker than a human or slower than a human. That's the idea around this one with the changeling.
Okay, no, I know they're obviously worried about their child being replaced, but there's nothing really negative here, is there? There's nothing that's going to bring death and destruction to a family or a community.
Well, I'm glad you've said that, because the fourth trait
Oh, is this death and destruction to the family?
is that some of them can be quite violent, which is why you need to drive the changelings out of your home or try and find your true child back, because the changelings can suddenly become very violent out of nowhere.
They hit 15 or 13, they become a teenager. That's it.
Yeah, or they start hitting out for inexplicable reasons, or biting, or screaming, or shouting.
Hang on a second. Sorry, baby. This could potentially be a baby that's screaming randomly, scratching, shouting, crying. It's pretty much
Correct.
what a baby does. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's basically a baby acting like a baby.
Yep.
Okay. It must have been quite an epidemic back then.
But because they would act violently, it was thought that to get rid of it, you had to be violent back to it.
Okay, that's a bit concerning.
Do we want to go into the theories? Because the next bit...
I want to go into... We get to see the differences between, European, because that's a lot of that British. Is there any difference between the European versions of the Changelings? Or did everybody have pretty much the same version?
It depends. Some there are differences, in others they're not. So, for example, let's talk about Cornwall. So in Cornwall, there's the Menantol stones, and they are said to have fairies or pixie guardians, and if it's Cornwall, we're probably talking piskies again.
Yay!
Who can make miraculous
piskies.
cures. In one case, they claim that a changeling baby was passed through one of the stones, and that's how their real child was returned to them, because evil piskies had changed her child, and the stones reversed the spell.
So reversing a spell like that, it sounded more like a possession than an actual physical changing. But a lot of this is they believe in that the child, or not just child, is it? Because it can be anybody. I can see reports here that it's attractive young men and women are obviously taken. So it can be any age, as long as you're desirable for being sold on to the devil or being sold on to the fairy kingdom to enrich their gene pool. I think that's the other thing they're saying. But it could be any age, couldn't it? But it doesn't sound like it's a spell. It sounds like everybody's just actually thinking an actual swap.
Well, in northern England, it's believed that elves who live in elf hills will come and kidnap children, sometimes even adults, and take them back to their homes. And they would be replaced with a simulation of a baby, usually an adult elf. And the real baby would then be treated well by the elves and would grow up to become one of their own. Whereas the changeling baby would end up being discontented and wearisome, leading to what we spoke about with being violent and also having that higher intelligence because it's an adult. And they would end up feeling very sad and then start attacking the humans. It was believed that you had to force the changeling to reveal itself, which was either done by surprising it or making it laugh.
Okay. It's fascinating. Yeah, fascinating here. These theories. I'm just reading one here that they believe that only human midwives can bring fairy babies. Sorry, I'm going to say fairy. I know I can't say it. Fairy babies into the world. So they have to be birthed by a human midwife. So women would be swapped out and replaced. So they have a job to do. They said human milk had to be used for fairy children to survive. So again, you would either take women or supplement the children so they could be suckled by a human. There's also stories here. It says here that changelings often would forget where they came from and continue to live their life as a human. But also, when it was also found, if a human child had grown up, they would be happy to stay in that world. They wouldn't want to come back. So you'd literally, there would be a swap, and there would be either side want to come back. Everybody's happy apart from the parents.
So I've got a story here of a real person that they thought was a changeling. So this is Robert Elliot, who was from Liddesdale, which is southern Scotland. This takes place in the 19th century. So Robert Elliot was a dwarf. So he had dwarfism. I don't know if that's the correct PC terminology, but I'm going to go with it.
I've been watching programs about that recently with people who suffer from dwarfism, and they say yes, they suffer from dwarfism. They are happy to be called dwarves.
Okay, cool.
They don't like to be called little people, and they don't like to be called anything that isn't their name. They don't like to be called bitch either, apparently.
Well, Robert Elliot was a 19th century dwarf who they claimed was a changeling. And the reason why they claimed he was a changeling is basically due to his dwarfism. And he was taunted by other boys in the area and would casually pull out a large knife to threaten them, often killing them, which this leads into the violent tendencies of a changeling. And they all believe that he must be a changeling because, look, when we call him a changeling, he tries to kill us with a knife, and he has killed people with his knife. And they could outrun him, but his neighbour, who was 6'3", William Scott of Kindean, a sturdy and strong borderer, had slandered Robert Elliot's name. So Robert Elliot invited him over, took him up the stairs and challenged him to a fight, at which point Scott ran away when he saw the big knife. So that's the story of somebody who they claimed was a changeling, and they claimed he was a changeling because he suffered from dwarfism and because he was quite violent, because he would get out a knife when people called him a changeling, which of course he would. If I had a big knife and I was around in that sort of time and somebody just kept basically harassing and bullying me constantly, of course I'd be like, yeah, leave me alone. I'm fed up now. Stop it.
I mean, it obviously sounds like somebody who's very different anyway, so you're going to have lots of problems with being accepted.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Ballad of Tim? What's it called? The Ballad of Tam Lin. Have you seen that? It's a Scottish poem / story of Scottish folklore about. The ballad follows Janet, who is a headstrong young woman who ignores warnings to stay away from the woods of Caterhall. There she meets Tam Lin, a mysterious knight who guards the woods and demands a toll from any maiden who passes, usually their rings, their clothing, or their virginity. After their encounter, Janet returns home pregnant. So I guess she didn't have any rings or clothing. So after she returns home pregnant, when confronted by her father, she refuses to marry any of his knights, declaring her love for the elfin grey. She returns to the woods to find Tamlin, who then reveals a shocking truth. He's not a fairy. He says he's a holy chapel knight, and Christendom did see, whatever that means. He explains that he was a human kidnapped by the Queen of the Fae after falling from his horse. While life in the Fae realm is pleasant, there's a dark catch. They're tined, which is a tithe to hell. So the tithe to hell is that if you live in the Fae kingdom, because you are fair and full of flesh, they have to sacrifice someone to keep you there. But he feared the queen was going to choose him as the sacrifice this year. Yeah, so what's it says? So she had to perform Janet had to perform a terrifying ritual on Halloween. She must wait at Miles Cross at midnight for the Fae court to ride by. She has to let the black and brown horses pass, pull the rider off the milk white steed to the ground. Once she grabs him, the Queen of the Fae will use glamour to turn Tim Lan into terrifying shapes to make her let go. So she could turn him into an adder, a bear, or a lion, or a red-hot bar of iron. So then she had to throw the burning Tam Lin into a well of water, and then emerged as a naked mortal man, who she then decided to marry.
Like when you said Janet and you started talking about this
Janet.
whole plot on Halloween, the only thing that was
Yeah.
going through my head was, damn it, Janet,
Janet,
I
yeah.
love you. And then as you were telling the story, I was like, yes, surely Dr. Frankenfurter's got to make an appearance at some point. And and then you said naked man, so there we go, there's Rocky.
Yep. So it says here, the Queen of the Fae ends the ballad with the famous bitter curse, admitting that if she had known Janet would have won, she would have taken Tamlin's eyes out and replaced them with wood, so he could never looked at her with love again.
Okay.
So this is literally, this isn't somebody acting weird, unless of course you call somebody who wants to take a woman's ring, clothing, or virginity as something strange. Then he had to explain the fact that he was actually not really a rapey person. He was a fairy. He was a changeling. But you can get me back to normal, so I don't have to go to prison. Maybe that's what it's all about.
Maybe.
But it doesn't explain turning him into a red hot bar of iron that she could throw into a well. That's a bit hard to fake, that one.
We see the interesting bit here is Tylwyth Teg, which is Welsh, and it's Welsh for fair family. So therefore, the fairy folk of Wales. And Tylwyth Teg are described as having fair hair. And they apparently will kidnap golden-haired children and leave changelings in their place. They live their lives by dancing, making fairy rings. They live underground. They give people riches and and if they're given gifts, they'll give people gifts back. And this all then links back into when we did that episode of Fairy Cows many, many months ago, where they can live in, they will give people gifts if they're looked after. However, those fae cannot touch iron, because if they touch iron, they'll be banished back to the Fey world, never to be seen again.
There's another one here I've seen. Yeah, how to prevent your child being taken is iron and salt. Apparently, because they're allergic to iron, placing a pair of cold scissors or a knife over the cradle would. Can you imagine? It's just like that giant carving knife you've just bought. I'm just going to hang it over the cradle. The baby will, look after the baby. I'm sure that piece of string that I've just made from some little bit of whatever, that'll hold it. That's never going to drop on the kid.
So here is a Welsh story here.
Okay.
So a changeling story tells of a woman whose 3-year-old son was stolen by the Fae, and she was later given instructions by a cunning man who's a magician. We spoke about them before when we spoke about witchcraft, on how to get the 3-year-old son back. She had to remove the top of a raw egg, stir the contents inside the egg, and as the changeling watched her do these certain routines and rituals by the cunning man, it established the otherworldly identity. So the changeling then remembered that they were actually from somewhere else, not a human baby. She then had to go to the crossroads at midnight during a full moon, observed a fairy in order to confirm that her son was with them. Lastly, she obtained a black hen and without plucking it, roasted it over a wood fire until every feather dropped off. The changeling then disappeared and her real son was returned back to her.
It's funny you say about the eggshell thing. Apparently it's called the brewery of eggshells. Apparently it was a popular trick. The parent would start cooking or brewing inside an empty eggshell. The changeling would be so shocked by the absurdity, it would break character, exclaim, "I have seen the first acorn before the first oak, but I've never seen a brewing in an eggshell." And that's how you tell, because that's what your baby would shout. So just brewing or cooking in an eggshell would be enough to freak them out. Can you imagine that being the most absurd thing you could see in that era? That's they cooked something in an eggshell. Never seen anything like it.
Well, in Ireland, if you put a changeling in a fire, if you suspect your child of being a changeling, you put it in a fire, it then jumps up the chimney, and then the human child returns.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I read something very similar. Yeah, so the threat of fire. But they don't say put it in the fire. They say hold them over a fire. So if you hold your baby over a fire, it will vanish up the chimney, and the Fae would bring back the human child to save their own. Yeah, that's quite quite interesting. But it's funny. I do a search for changelings online, and yes, My Little Pony turns up for changelings. Apparently, there was a whole film based on it called Friendship is Magic. So there was an entire My Little Pony film based on changelings, which is really weird. I would never expect that. Um, so Scandinavians have them. They're called troll childs. Oh, I'm not even going. You know me. I can't say fairy. I'm not going to say bolt biting because that's never going to be right. Yes, they get Germany and Iberia. They're all over. Oh, and apparently they do always recommend you to baptize your child before they do anything because that's what's going to stop them being taken. Okay, changelings are everywhere. It looks like in all different cultures.
They
So what's
are.
the common thread here, Dan?
Well,
Why?
I was looking at Scandinavia, going back to when we said about iron, because again in Scandinavia, apparently Fae again and supernatural beings within Scandinavian folklore are all afraid of iron. So Scandinavian parents would place an iron tool such as a pair of scissors or a knife on top of the cradle of an unbaptized infant to stop it being abducted. And in theirs, instead of being Fae, it's trolls.
They do love their trolls in Scandinavia, though, to be fair.
And they actually believe in Scandinavia that it's because the trolls will get a better life being brought up by a human than with the trolls. So it's actually them trying to give their child a better life. However, it then links into the fact that because the changeling is a troll, it's then violent. It also has that slower development, and therefore they notice. Now, in Scandinavia, if they believed that their human child had been taken and turned into a changeling, the parents could force the child's return by treating the changeling cruelly, using methods such as whipping or putting it inside a heated oven. In one case, a woman was taken to court. This is a real case. Taken to court for killing her own child in an oven. In Sweden, it was believed that a fire must be kept lit in the room housing a child before it is christened, and that the water used to bathe the child should never be thrown out, since both of these will prevent the child from being taken by the trolls.
So extreme, isn't it? Right. Okay. So I know we're going to talk about modern theories now.
We are,
what I
but
wanted
we've
to
also got a few other bits which I find quite interesting because
Okay.
Spain, they believe that it's a water nymph that kidnaps
That
the
is
children.
different.
Yeah, and it's the Zana. Zana are little female fairies with supernatural beauty. They would bring the Zana babies, swap them with human babies, and it's because they would then get the fairy babies baptized, and it's because the Zana cannot produce milk, so it was a way of getting their fairy babies to get milk.
Okay,
And
right. So, but you said that they're little fairies, right? So, how tiny would the baby be, and nobody would notice?
I don't know, I guess baby size.
No, how big? You always imagine fairies as being small little things. Obviously, unless you're talking cross channel ones, they're quite big fairies. But you said little fairies. I don't expect fairies to be 6 foot tall. I think they're going to be little.
Oh, I've just read it. It's when they're first born, they're little, like humans.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's funny, you never think of them as being big,
But they
ever.
start as they sort of just, rather than how babies go from looking like little potato monsters to people, these sort of start off as a miniature version of their adult self and then grow to be the adult version of themselves.
Yeah, so I've never thought of them as being big. I've always thought of them being little, little with wings
Um,
flying around. Never big things.
and again, in Spain, you said about the eggshell and the brewing.
Yes.
That's how they'll identify the changelings in Spain as well. The exact same thing.
I just peeled a couple of boiled eggs. I can still smell it. I thought it was a fart a little while ago, but it's not. I remembered I actually just ate boiled egg.
So, Germany, changelings are known as Welschbalg, Weschkind, Kehlkopf, or Dickkopf.
Sorry, Dick who?
Dick Kopf, which
Dick
apparently
Kopf.
hints towards the fact they had huge necks and heads of changelings.
When you said that, it points to the fact they had huge heads and necks. Yeah.
Yep. Now, in
No.
Germany, to find a changeling and get your real child back, you would confuse the changeling. So, yes, brewing in eggshells is another thing. Attempting to heat the changeling in an oven, hitting or whipping the changeling, and the changeling must sometimes be fed with a woman's milk before replacing the children. And then in German folklore, several possible parents are known for changelings. Those are the devil, a female dwarf, the Phoenix Mainlin, which were sprites or dwarves in Germany, a water spirit, or a Roggenmume or Roggenmutter, which is Rye Aunt or Rye Mother, a demonic woman living in cornfields and stealing human children.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's plenty of choice though, isn't there? There's plenty of choice.
Yeah, there's even stories from the Isle of Man with which we spoke about fairies and things on the Isle of Man before. There's even stories from Poland where the changelings in Poland would have a different appearance with abnormally large abdomen, a small or a large head, a hump, thin arms and legs, a hairy body, and sometimes long claws.
Do you know, apart from the claws and the thin arms and legs, that is me again.
Apparently, if you tie a red ribbon around the baby's wrist and put a red hat on its head and keep it out of the moonlight, it would stop them being kidnapped because they're too identifiable. Other methods included not cleaning the nappies after sunset and never turning their head away from the baby as it sleeps. If the baby is kidnapped, then in order to get your child back, you would have to whip the changeling with a birch stick, pour water from an eggshell all over it while shouting, "Take yours, give mine back." Typically, the Mumuna, which is the female swamp demon that's swapped the child for the changeling, would then feel sorry for the child because the child's now being abused and return the human baby to its mother.
Oh, that's nice. They actually care.
So a lot of this is
It's child brutality,
essentially,
isn't it?
yeah.
It's cruelty to children. Okay, I found one potential origin, real life origin of a situation that brought on changelings. It doesn't say when, but in, let's say, the olden days, there were inhabitants of various regions in Europe that had been driven into hiding by invaders, by culture or whatever, but they've been driven into hiding. And they suggested that those people would break into houses and swap them over for a healthy child with their sickly child, because obviously they wanted to survive and keep passing on the generations, but you get rid of your child. So that could well be it. You could wake up one morning and find out your kid is literally completely different because it's been taken by somebody who lives in a cave somewhere just to replace. I mean, that's quite believable though. I can see that happening. I can see someone, because we see that even now. We used to see it when hospitals were a lot less security conscious, where people would walk in and they would either swap or take children because they either wanted one that was better than theirs or healthier, or they just wanted the child. So, we even in relatively modern times, people would be swapped children out.
Yes. Well, I've read here Charles the First was apparently a changeling.
Really?
Yeah, so it's reportedly rumoured that King Charles I was a changeling due to his peevish nature.
Peevish?
Yeah, so peevish nature, so irritable, grumpy, being easily annoyed over minor things, small inconveniences. They complain a lot, they're fretful, they're usually sulky, especially when their wishes are not met. They tend to be quite disobedient or stubborn.
We're talking Gen Z again, aren't we here?
Well, not necessarily, which we'll
sounds a
come
lot
back
like
to
it.
in a bit.
Okay, so there's differences. Okay.
But because of these behaviours, his nursemaid claimed that he must have been a changeling because one night she saw a strange figure appearing at his bedside, cast a cloak over the baby's cradle, and then vanished. So she thinks that strange figure took the real King Charles and left Prince Charles, I suppose, at that point, and replaced it with a changeling.
Do you think that she might have like accidentally dropped the kid on his head and then just used that as an excuse?
Possibly, but
I
I'll
think,
come back to his what's
okay.
being described as peevish nature in a moment. We'll come back to that in a moment. I've also found that in 1826, Anne Rock bathed Michael Leahy, a 4-year-old boy unable to speak or stand, 3 times in the Flesk, which is a river in Ireland. He actually drowned on the 3rd time. She swore she was merely attempting to drive the fairy out of him. The jury acquitted her of murder. So she was trying to get rid of so she thought that Michael was a changeling. In 1895, Bridget Clearly was killed by several people, including her husband and cousins, after a short bout of illness, which they think was most like pneumonia. Jack Doone accused Bridget of being a fairy changeling. It is debatable whether whether her husband actually believed her to be a fairy, or instead used the excuse after killing her in a fit of rage. The killers were convicted of manslaughter rather than murder, as even after the death, they claimed to be convinced they'd actually killed a changeling, not the real Bridget Clearly.
That's crazy that people use that still as an excuse. Even, that's, what was that, 150? I didn't miss the exact date you're talking about there, but it's less than 200 years ago, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, but then people committing crimes today based on witchcraft and primitive beliefs, and children are being and not just children, people all over the world are being killed for what are it's fairy tales basically.
Yeah. Interestingly, here's another thing: is a changeling was sometimes referred to as an oaf or an Ulf. So AUF or AOF, which of course the word oaf now is used to describe a clumsy or a stupid person, which is derived from the historic English word for a changeling, which was Alf, AUF. This in turn is believed to have originated from the Middle English Alvan and Elven, and ultimately from the Old Norse word for an elf, which was Alpha.
Cool.
So oaf, a clumsy or a stupid person, that word originally comes from elf, which is also explains the whole changeling thing and some of the behaviors attributed to a changeling.
Oh, yeah, but like okay, so I know I've joked a lot about these things and said I put my hand up a load of times, but these are things that everybody's different to each other.
They are.
And these are a lot of things I genuinely could say about myself that don't match with the person next to me or anybody else. We often talk about this at work, is that a lot of us feel like we are completely outsiders. We're all very different to we think everybody else, and I think we pretty the same here as well. We look around,
Yes,
and you don't sometimes feel like you don't fit in.
yes, and these changelings definitely didn't fit in, and a lot of their behavior, you've got constantly screaming, crying, exhibiting unnatural intelligence, especially over certain topics and knowledge. And going back to Charles I and his described peevish behaviour, easily triggered and easily annoyed by small inconveniences, seen as often complaining, being sulky, being very stubborn and unwilling to change their opinions, sometimes being seen as being disobedient, and being snappy with people. Now, changelings, and I was going to mention this bit earlier, but I thought this actually fits in better with what we're talking now. Some characteristics of changelings are that they can flap their hands, they shake, they fidget, and they move around, and they might be resistant to learning or even resistant in speaking and not having a voice at all. They may show extreme talents in things such as being very good at playing music, and their mischievous behaviour can be taken as a sign that they're rejecting their parents' affection. Therefore, they're clearly a fairy because they're being mischievous and rejecting it. Now, when we think about all of those things there and take into consideration that people do think that Charles I possibly had autism based on lots of writing about him and his peevish behaviour, as it was described, there are things there that would tick off how somebody with autism may act. There are researchers out there from the medical and sociological view, where the historians and psychologists actually think that the more you look into the myth of the changelings, it was most likely used to explain children with developmental disabilities such as autism, ADHD, or even Down syndrome. So they've actually made links to these changelings potentially being children that weren't actually kidnapped by fairies and things, and actually were probably children that nowadays we know as being neurodiverse. And they actually think that a lot of the things with regards to beating them into trying to in getting their children back would, if you hit somebody enough, they're going to scream in pain, aren't they? So if they're not talking, of course they're going to eventually scream if you keep hitting them. And when you look at history and how people have treated people with disabilities throughout history,
because they've never understood what a disability is until modern times.
Exactly. It would certainly tie in. And they do think that these beliefs of the changelings and the fairy kidnappings would provide a way for the parents historically to understand and even console themselves of having a child with a disability because they didn't understand it. And it was easier for those parents historically to think, oh, my child's been kidnapped by a fairy. They would think that was a way of them being able to come to terms with their child being different to other children.
And of course, if you they say the stories we've talked about, the story is the child gets taken to a much better place and is with the fairies. They're looking after them, loving them, caring them. They want them because they're much better than what they have. So again, it's that thing of dealing with loss, isn't it? I mean, it's the best way to deal with loss. You'd like to think that your loved ones are, if they aren't who they were or they've disappeared, they're in a better place now. It's much better than thinking the alternative.
And there are people out there who do see it as a way of mourning in a way of that. There are some people that do go through that when they find out that their child does have a disability, and that's one of the things that they do struggle with. Not all, but some.
And especially if you didn't understand what it was in those, even up to, I mean, we know that neurodiversity really has only come into the public, with all the jokes we've been doing today. It's only really been the last few years where people have actually properly understood and the impact of what happens in your life can bring on neurodiverse issues. And so you've got genetics and you've got, experience and you've got medicines and there's, obviously there's everything can trigger something. And neurodiverse just means you're different to everybody, the majority. It doesn't mean it's anything crazy.
It just means your brain is wired ever so slightly different to what would be considered normal or neurotypical. It just means your brain is wired up slightly different to what would be considered that.
I mean, I look back at, so I was just going to say, I look back at when I was a kid, my parents were very good. They did put up with me, but I know that I had issues when I was a kid. Can't explain why, but when I was very young, I was a pain in the neck, but I don't know why. I had to get, not until I hit my sort of mid to late teens and left home did things fall into place again for me. But for many years, I was a nightmare.
Yeah.
And I admit it. I'll always admit that.
So for me, I remember whilst at university studying, and I did study special needs education, and I also studied disabilities and special educational needs as part of my degree. And I remember researching ADHD and at the time going, well, that does exist. That's just normal, isn't it?
That's how we all are, isn't it?
And then 10, 15 years later, finding out that actually the reason why I thought that was normal is because it was describing me, and I now have an adult diagnosis, which explains, like you were saying, a lot of my childhood.
Yeah.
A lot of my
Actually,
childhood.
you consider your degree, it's pretty why you've managed to get on with me for so long. Because you've just been able to do it. You've been using me as a paper, haven't you, the whole time?
Yeah, it's my PhD thesis.
I'm just a PhD thesis. But no, I mean, but the thing is, I think if anybody's listening and they've got children and they're going through really hard times, it doesn't mean it's always going to be like this.
No,
Just stick
definitely
with it.
not.
Don't put your kids in the oven. They, please.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh, but yeah, no, but it does, like you said, and I know, it does get easier, and and I think as well, there's a bravadery around it all, isn't there? Where nowadays you sort of, because it's accepted, and because we understand it now, I think a lot of people, there is this shield of, I'm doing all right, and it is a case of, sometimes maybe you're not, maybe you are, who knows? But this is why I said at the start, do we need a trigger warning for this? Because a lot of these tales of changelings, the more you look into the changelings and the way people describe their behaviors, are very, very similar to those that are neurodiverse, specifically autism and Down syndrome. And when you start looking at how they treated these changelings, and the fact that a lot of them were put in ovens or whipped to the point where they died, and the way attitudes of disability have changed over time from being completely rejected and, you're disabled, there's something wrong with you, we don't want you here, go away, to where we are now in society where people are accepted because we understand it. It would make sense that these historians saying that that's what it is.
Yes. So on that bombshell. No, but this is a good one though. This is very different. Let's raise this up a bit now, because we got very serious, and it's really nice to have a mystery that has a logical and scientific conclusion that we can actually say, yes, people experience things that weren't normal for them. And how they grew up, especially in smaller communities when there were less people. But there's a reason, and now this is why it doesn't happen anymore, or it shouldn't happen now, because we should be a lot more open. So we got the whole list of things here. No hanging knives and scissors over your children's cots, no putting them in ovens, no whipping them, but you can continue to cook in eggshells if you want.
Yes. And be kind to yourselves and be kind to your children. And also, bringing this back, like you said, it's nice to have one. This is very similar, like to have a logical explanation. This is like when we looked at the nursery bogies with Jenny Greenteeth and what have you, where all of those folklore creatures and stories, they had a logical story behind them because they had been invented in order to scare children into good behavior, to actually protect them. They, for example, staying away from deep, dangerous water, because if not, the monster that lives there will come out and attack you. Like some that,
staying away from members of the royal family, staying away from BBC TV presenters. These are things you have to learn through those tales.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry,
one that we never did look at with one that we never looked at with the nursery bogies, that I'm just going to throw out here because it's a very, very quick one, which I quite like, and it's a nice. I think it's a little bit of a silly one to end with. The gooseberry wife.
Oh, this is your favourite, isn't it?
The gooseberry wife is a creature that lives on the Isle of Wight that guards fruit bushes and catches children stealing the fruit. So it's just a creature that hangs around the fruit bushes going, no, stop stealing the fruit.
When you said gooseberries, I thought you meant your Norfolk gooseberry bush. It's where the babies come from, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where I was found, under the gooseberry bush.
And it's funny, the gooseberry bush is actually grown in the lady garden. So it all makes sense. A lovely, neat shrubbery. Who knows? It might have been a wild shrubbery. I don't know these things.
And my mum takes the gooseberries and makes some very nice gooseberry jam. Or as we call it, goosegog jam.
Yeah, and some of those gooseberries end up presenting a semi-successful podcast.
Hi, hello.
Some gooseberries are better than just jam.
Yeah, it's when people realise that our logo is actually a gooseberry that's halfway through turning into jam.
Oh yeah, I like logos with more than one meaning to it.
Yeah, and we've just invented a meaning there. There we go.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we've now cheered the episode up before we say goodbye. Hopefully, that's what we've done.
If not, tough.
Yeah, this one was one where we've tried to be as sensitive as possible.
Well, at least sometimes.
Yeah, we can do sensible sometimes.
Hope I haven't offended too many people, but if I have, you know my heart's in the right place. It's in the centre of my chest, beating irregularly.
At least you said centre of your chest. People often get that wrong.
Yeah, I know. Idiots. Tell you, they're all of them. Go to university, idiots.
Yeah.
What was that degree you did again, Dan?
My degree was education studies, so I looked at the history, the psychology, and the sociology, all based around educational theories.
Yeah, look where it's got you.
And on that news, thank you for joining us this week on the Boo-Foons Mystery Investigators. I've been Dan, he's been Steve. Do look at our social media pages, give us some love over there, follow, like the videos, leave some comments, tell us what you think. Do you love us? Do you hate us? Let us know. Join our Discord page, go to the website boofoons.co.uk and you can join our Discord server where you can chat to us. Maybe you've got an idea for what we need to look at in the future. Let us know, we can do it. And be back Saturday because we'll have a silly episode Saturday followed by another Wednesday mystery.
Another sensible Wednesday episode. That's what you were going to say, but then you changed your mind.
Yeah, because I realised that today is about as sensible as we get.
Yes, we never get this sensible again.
Unless we have guests. We're very sensible with the guests.
We are. We're very good with guests.
This is the
Very
most
kind.
sensible we get without a guest.
Yeah, we've gone off again on another tangent.
We have.
Bye.
Bye.
Boo-Foons, mystery investigators.